Hello and welcome to lecture number 60. This is topic 4.7, Black Women's Leadership in Grassroots Organizing in the Civil Rights Movement. There's two learning objectives today, and the first one is going to cover Black women's leadership in the Civil Rights Movement, and it says, describe the ways Black women leaders furthered the goals of the major civil rights organizations and grassroots efforts. In the Civil Rights Movement, Black women were central leaders, though they often faced gender discrimination. Some of these important women include Joanne Robinson, who helped organize the Montgomery bus boycott, and Diane Nash, who played a critical role in organizing the sit-ins in the early 1960s at lunch counters in Nashville. Major organizations frequently attempted to confine women to supportive or administrative roles. For instance, Rosa Parks, renowned for sparking the Montgomery bus boycott, was a secretary in the NAACP. In her autobiography, she mentions feeling pressured into accepting the secretary position simply because she was a woman. Women were also excluded from high-profile speaking engagements. Despite the immense contributions of women like Ella Baker and Dorothy Height to organizations and the planning of the 1963 March on Washington, no women were granted speaking roles at that event. Ella Baker and Fannie Lou Hamer both emphasized the importance of addressing both racial and gender discrimination. Ella Baker had been deeply involved in three major civil rights organizations, the NAACP, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Meanwhile, Fannie Lou Hamer is best known for her work with the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which aims to challenge the all-whites delegation at the 1964 Democratic National Convention. The activism of these women was rooted in a long tradition of Black women leaders dating back to figures such as Maria W. Stewart, Sojourner Truth, and Harriet Tubman. Maria W. Stewart was one of the first African-American women, black or white, to speak publicly on political issues, delivering fiery speeches in the 1830s that condemned slavery and advocated for racial and gender equality. Harriet Tubman not only led enslaved people to freedom through the Underground Railroad, but also served as a Union spy during the Civil War and was the first woman to lead an army operation. Ida B. Wells was instrumental in exposing the horrors of lynching through her journalism and investigative work, while Mary McLeod Bethune founded the National Council of Negro Women and advised President Franklin D. Roosevelt advocating for African Americans during the New Deal era. Ella Baker is often referred to as the mother of the Civil Rights Movement. She began her activism career in the NAACP, starting as a secretary and later rising to become the national director of branches. In this role, she coordinated the establishment of new branches and worked tirelessly to recruit members. During her tenure at the NAACP, Baker built a vast network of activists across the country, which would prove instrumental in organizing future protests and boycotts. Her ability to connect with people and inspire grassroots involvement put her at the center of the civil rights struggle, even before more well-known events of the 1950s and 1960s. Baker was a co-founder of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or the SCLC, and served as its first interim executive director. However, she ultimately left the organization due to ideological differences with Martin Luther King Jr. She strongly opposed the rigid hierarchical structure of the SCLC, believing it hindered widespread participation. She later was central to the founding of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Baker envisioned SNCC as a grassroots organization with group-centered leadership rather than a leader-centered hierarchy like the NAACP or the SCLC. She famously stated, "Strong people don't need leaders," encapsulating her belief in empowering communities to lead themselves. Under her mentorship, young leaders such as Diane Nash, John Lewis, Bob Moses, and Stokely Carmichael rose to prominence, shaping the next generation of civil rights leadership. For example, John Lewis later became a congressman and a key advocate for voting rights, while Stokely Carmichael popularized the concept of Black Power, which expanded the movement's goals. Baker also emphasized the importance of addressing both racism and sexism, encouraging young activists to tackle these interconnected forms of oppression. She understood that for the movement to be sustainable, it needed to foster a new generation of leaders. In her view, leader-centered groups risked losing their influence if the figureheads were lost to death or other circumstances. This foresight echoed the experiences of earlier movements, such as the abolitionist and suffragist efforts, where centralized leadership often led to challenges and succession planning. In SNCC's founding in 1960, Ella Baker invited 150 student activists from across the country to a conference at Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina. Both Baker and Martin Luther King Jr. spoke to the group. King emphasized the importance of nonviolent methods and expressed his hope that the students would become a student wing of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, thereby falling under its organizational umbrella. However, Baker had a different vision. She encouraged the students to form their own independent group, one that could operate autonomously and focus on grassroots organizing. The formation of SNCC at this meeting solidified the role of young people in the civil rights movement. SNCC would go on to organize some of the most significant direct action campaigns of the 1960s, including freedom rides, the sit-ins, and voter registration drives in the Deep South. Baker's insistence on grassroots leadership helped shape SNCC into one of the most influential organizations of the era, with a model that allowed local activists to take the lead in their communities. When addressing the group about the importance of their work, Baker used a memorable phrase to inspire them, describing the movement as being bigger than a hamburger. By this, she meant that activism was about far more than gaining access to goods and services, such as lunch counters. Rather, it was about achieving full inclusion and equality in all aspects of American life. This philosophy reflected her broader belief in fighting for systemic change, not just incremental victories. Baker's speech resonated with the students who understood their struggle was tied to dismantling the deeper structure of racism and inequality in America. The other black female activist we're highlighting is Dorothy Height of the National Council of Negro Women. Height began her work in the Young Women's Christian Association, or YWCA, where she initially focused on desegregating the organization. Her efforts culminated in the creation of the YWCA Center for Racial Justice. By 1957, Height became the president of the NCNW, an organization that Mary McLeod Bethune had founded earlier in the century. She remained in this leadership position for an incredible 40 years, serving from 1957 to 1997. Under her leadership, the NCNW engaged in numerous critical civil rights projects, including voter registration drives and innovative economic programs like the Pig Bank, which provided rural black families with economic opportunities by literally lending them pigs to raise and breed. This initiative reflected Height's commitment to addressing systemic economic inequalities through practical, community-centered solutions, drawing on earlier traditions of mutual aid and collective uplift that had long been part of African American community strategies. Height's tenure also coincided with major social changes beyond the civil rights movement. She was instrumental in shaping the NCNW's approach to addressing gender-specific challenges faced by black women, such as access to education, healthcare, and economic opportunities, areas where women like Mary Church Terrell and Frances Ellen Watkins Harper had earlier laid foundational groundwork. Height frequently collaborated with the Big Six leaders of major civil rights organizations: Roy Wilkins of the NAACP, Martin Luther King Jr. of the SCLC, James Farmer of CORE, John Lewis of SNCC, A. Philip Randolph of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, and Whitney Young of the National Urban League. Despite her significant contributions, her role was often overlooked by the press because she was a woman. She was not included as part of this influential brain trust of men, even though her input was critical to many of their initiatives. For the 1963 March on Washington, Dorothy Height helped organize logistics and mobilize supporters. However, as mentioned earlier, she was not given the opportunity to speak to the 250,000 attendees, many of whom she had helped bring to the event. This exclusion was emblematic of the gender barriers that black women faced within the civil rights movement, despite their indispensable contributions. The second learning objective deals more with the grassroots organization, and it says, describe the ways grassroots organizing beyond the South advanced the goals of the civil rights movement. There are countless examples of grassroots movements we could analyze, but the two highlighted here come directly from the College Board curriculum. It's essential to understand these examples in depth and also compare them to other grassroots movements such as the sit-in boycotts or the wade-ins at segregated public pools and beaches. The first example is the Coordinating Council of Community Organizations, or the CCCO, which was established in the early 1960s in Chicago. The CCCO was an interracial coalition that brought together a broad array of groups, including traditional civil rights organizations like the Congress of Racial Equality and the NAACP, as well as religious organizations such as the Catholic Interracial Council of Chicago. Initially, the CCCO focused on protesting school segregation in Chicago, staging two large boycotts during the 1963-1964 school years. These boycotts drew significant attention to the city's de facto segregation, a form of racial discrimination that was particularly insidious in northern cities. While the Brown v. Board of Education decision in 1954 had declared segregation in public schools unconstitutional, Chicago's segregation persisted through discriminatory housing patterns and local policies. In 1965, the CCCO organized marches to pressure Mayor Richard Daley to remove the superintendents of schools, who had upheld segregationist policies. Later, the CCCO expanded its focus to include unemployment and housing discrimination, which were also significant challenges for black people in Chicago. In 1966, the organization partnered with the SCLC to facilitate a summit between city leaders and real estate agents. The goal of the summit was to address discriminatory housing practices, but the lack of follow-through on agreements led to frustration and disillusionment. By 1967, the CCCO disbanded partly due to the failure of the Housing Summit and the shifting dynamics within the civil rights movement. The rise of the Black Power movement in the mid-1960s, with its emphasis of self-determination and racial pride, made interracial coalitions like the CCCO less popular. Additionally, the urban uprisings of 1966 and 1968, sparked by ongoing frustrations with systemic racism, highlighted the depth of racial and economic inequality in cities like Chicago. The last instance of grassroots organizing is the New York City School Boycott of 1964, also referred to as Freedom Day, which took place on February 3, 1964. This massive protest was organized by Barry Rustin, the same influential activist who had played a key role in organizing the 1963 March on Washington and was a co-founder of CORE. The boycott aimed to protest the de facto racial segregation in New York City schools. Unlike the explicit segregation seen in southern states, de facto segregation in the North was deeply entrenched and harder to dismantle because it stemmed from housing patterns, economic inequalities, and local policies. During the 1960s, schools that predominantly enrolled Black and Latino students were plagued by inadequate facilities, less experienced teachers, and severe overcrowding. In some cases, the overcrowding was so extreme that schools operated on a shift schedule, meaning students attended for few hours each day, which negatively impacted their education. Shortly before the boycott, the school district published a proposed integration plan, but it was deemed insufficient by protest organizers and activists. In response, they went ahead with the boycott on February 3, 1964. 464,000 students, nearly half of New York City's student body, participated by staying home from school. This massive act of protest is still considered the largest single-day civil rights demonstration in U.S. history. Despite its size and significance, the boycott did not achieve its intended goal of meaningful desegregation. Progress was slow, and New York City remains one of the most segregated school systems in the country to this day. The New York City school boycott highlighted the enduring impact of de facto segregation, even in regions that prided themselves on being more progressive than the South. It also demonstrated the power of grassroots organizing to mobilize massive numbers of people, a tactic that would be seen again in future movements. And finally, here's the recap. Women leaders like Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, and Dorothy Height were central to Black freedom movements, often experiencing gender discrimination. And secondly, grassroots organizations in New York and Chicago were just as impactful as leader-oriented organizations. Thank you for watching. If you would like to watch the next lecture, click the thumbnail on the screen. And if you would like more resources to help you study, you can visit apushlights.com/AFAM. I wish you the best of luck with your studies, and I hope to see you back on the next lecture.